Hello, everyone. This is Harvinder Nagpal here. I am a GTM identity specialist with AWS working on workforce identity services. And I'm here to talk about how you can accelerate your cloud migration and modernization journey using AWS Identity Services to provide frictionless access and improve time to market for directory aware uploads. I have 15 plus years of experience in this identity access management domain prior to joining to AWS. So I've seen the way from on-prem to cloud adoption and accelerating cloud transformation. For today's presentation, I am joined with our partners from DXC Technologies. So I'm going to hand it over to Jaswinder to introduce himself. Jaswinder, over to you.
Thanks, Avi. So my name is Jaswinder. I am from DXC Technologies. I work here as a workplace architect, and I have around 15 years of experience. And as part of my engagement with the DXC customers, we are doing a lot of work where we are migrating customers' workplace and identity and access management workloads from on-prem solutions to a cloud-based solution. So looking forward to this webinar. Thanks, Avi.
And I'm also joined with Rodney, who is a solution architect and a Microsoft specialist. So Rodney, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Harvey. My name is Rodney Undercuffler, and I'm a specialist solutions architect here at AWS, focused on Microsoft workloads. So I have over 20 years experience in the industry and have conversations all the time as I'm helping customers to migrate and modernize their identities here at AWS. So looking forward to the session today. Thanks.
Thanks, Rodney, for the introductions. So let's dive right into it. So today we are going to cover where we are seeing customers, how they are accelerating their cloud adoptions, what's been their business drivers, and what are the different approaches that they're following. And then how identity is one of the core foundational elements that they are using, and whether the identity is in different identity stores or they are using modern or legacy identity stores. And then how they are transforming this cloud adoption and accelerating this cloud adoption and cloud transformation using AWS Managed Active Directory. Active Directory as one of the core components for legacy components as in the enterprise as an identity store, right? So where are they seeing AWS Managed Active Directory as one of the core foundational element of their identity store? Then we're going to talk about a few customer use cases on different strategies they are using on their journey, on this cloud transformation journey, and using the identity store. And that's where Jaswinder from DXC is going to present some of the customer use cases. Then we're going to see a demo from Rodney on how to enable AWS Managed Active Directory and integrate with a few different AWS services. After that, I'm going to leave you with resources to learn more about AWS Managed Active Directory for you to actually not only read through this service, but also try it out. How can you try it in your AWS accounts and use it to integrate with various other AWS services to accelerate your cloud journey. So where are we seeing customers, right? So customers over the period of years, their business is growing, right? So they are always looking for innovation and trying to experiment through AWS cloud services to come up with more business-centric solution. So AWS enables our customers to experiment, innovate, and scale more quickly while providing the most flexible and scalable, secure cloud environment. So as part of this journey, they not only want to improve their security, increase agility, and accelerate innovation, but they want to make it as frictionless as possible for their end users, right? They want to cause as least disruption as possible to enable these AWS services to their end users. They want to make it user-friendly. They want to make it developer-friendly for automation, but overall improving a security posture. One of the analysts, they suggest they are expecting that 40% of global 2000 customers are going to use cloud adoption like AWS services, and the selection process to focus on business outcomes rather than pure play IT requirements. So how are customers using, why are they using cloud services? So the cloud transformation, what we are seeing is accelerating, right? Based on these analyst studies from IDC, Nucleus, McKinsey, our own analysis, we are seeing 59% of customers want to use cloud for their cost savings, right? And then they want to achieve faster time to market and not have to spend time on undifferentiated heavy lifting of setting up servers, setting up core infrastructure, networking, but they want to leverage cloud services for increased adoption. And what does it gain them? It gains them business benefits, like 31% of their cost saving on the infrastructure side. There are more features being delivered because of the agility, which is, they can just go subscribe to service, subscribe to AWS cloud, and start adopting and migrating their workloads, or modernizing or creating modern applications using cloud native technologies. So there are different business drivers how customers are using AWS, whether it is for cost reduction, it is for agility, right, and quickly getting to their business functions and not have to spend time on basic coding or infrastructure setup, right? So variety of use cases. A lot of customers are also using it to reduce their operational expense, right? Move from capex model to opex model and reduce their overall operational expenses. Provide scalability through multiple AWS regions, right, where they can scale these services across worldwide available regions in there. So a lot of business drivers. Where we are seeing customers are benefiting from this cloud adoption is they are doing not only lift and shift to migrate their on-premise applications over to AWS services, but also leveraging cloud native technologies to create modern application using modern technologies in there. So whether it is core infrastructure, right, which is using computes, EC2 computes, or VPCs, setting up networks, secure networks, and also enabling security, identity, and compliance, right? I mean, at the end of the day, these services have to be accessible for the users or for the identities. So how do they enable these identities to be to make these services accessible to them, right? And then as they embark on this journey to increase the business value by using more and more cloud native technologies, that's where the journey of modernization and innovation starts to happen. So as they are modernizing to these cloud native securities, whether it is to Amazon RDSs for databases or EC2 compute instances on Windows or Linux, or just Windows workloads, right, as they're migrating their Windows workloads over to AWS. So not only using this lift and shift for these technologies and these applications, but also starting to adopt more of cloud native services, whether it is QuickSight or workspaces to provide virtualized desktop environments. And not only that, but on the core cloud adoption side, but also on the third party SaaS software as an application services, right? Like a lot of customers are using their applications on Salesforce, ServiceNow, right, and Snowflake. So a lot of these SaaS applications. But at the end of the day, users, their business users, need access to all such services and applications. So how can AWS help provide that frictionless access and accelerate their journey to adopting these cloud services? So all these identities or these end user access, it's their credentials are stored in the identity store, right? And over a period of time, Active Directory has enterprises who had adopted Active Directory from way back when are still using it, or they have it in as one of the identity store. But not only that, they have also started to migrate over to modern identity access management technologies, whether it is for the Windows workloads or non-Windows workloads, to enable work from anywhere, right? Or defining identity-centric security perimeter. So Point being, no matter whether they are doing lift and shift of migration or just modernizing directly into the cloud, they are identity becomes one of the um, core security construct for them to enable access for their end users over to these applications and services. Like I mentioned, Active Directory from way back when year 2000s has been one of the identity stores for, especially for workforce identity and users' credentials, their user ID, password, their group membership, right, has been is getting stored, is being stored in Active Directory, and customers still tend to have it as one of the identity store, if not the only identity store in their enterprise, because of a variety of reasons, right? Since it's been around for such a long time, there are all these legacy applications that still need or that work with Kerberos authentication or end-to-end authentication for domain joined users, domain joined devices. So Active Directory provides that domain services. Although certificate services is provided by Windows servers, but customers associated with Active Directory, and they're still using the Active Directory through the certificate services to use it as one of the features. Customers are still using Active Directory Federation services to integrate with some of their legacy applications, although now there are modern identity access management and single sign-on protocols that are available, but customers are still using ADFS for some of those legacy applications. Few customers are also using it for DRM, digital rights management, but at the end of the day, a lot of customers still use Active Directory as a generalized LDAP service for users authentication and authorization, right? Whether it is a group-based authorization or users' credentials, user ID, password to authenticate into their desktop, into these applications for workforce identity services. So where does AWS, how is AWS helping them in accelerating these migrations or adopting some of these cloud native services where users' credentials are still stored in Active Directory? So what we are seeing is customers do not they want to provide that frictionless experience to their users whose credentials are already stored in Active Directory, but they are not ready to just totally give up their on-prem Active Directory. So where does AWS Direct? So that's where AWS Directory Services come into play. That provides a scalable and secure mechanism for customers to integrate into their current on-prem Active Directory. And when I say on-prem Active Directory, it could be literally on their data center, Active Directory residing on the data center, or it could be Active Directory in a self-managed mode on EC2 compute instances. So AWS provides two services, AD Connector and AWS Managed Active Directory. AD Connector is, think of it as a lightweight gateway or a proxy to their self-managed AD or on-prem AD, where the authentication request get passed over to Active Directory, their enterprise directory, so that there is no Active Directory credential caching in the cloud, or so they can quickly set it up in a lightweight mode. Although it's highly available across multiple availability zones by default, but it only supports integration with one AWS account to their Active Directory, on-prem Active Directory. Versus, on the other hand, AWS also provides a service called AWS Managed Active Directory, where it's actually Microsoft 2019 Active Directory, which is delivered as a service, as a managed service from AWS, where customers, they get to perform their business functions like managing users, managing their access, right? But not have to worry about the core operational and infrastructure parts or tasks for managing that Active Directory. And it's available in high availability mode across multiple regions in AWS, and it also supports connecting multiple AWS accounts to the same instance of AWS Managed AD. So customers do not have to create instances of AWS Managed AD for individual AWS accounts, but they can reuse the same AWS Managed AD instance across their multiple AWS accounts. This becomes really handy because customers are accelerating multi-account adoption and embarking on multi-account strategy for AWS. So having to rely on a single instance of AWS Managed AD and share it across multiple AWS accounts makes it even easier for them to adopt these AWS services. Real quick, how is AWS Managed Active Directory helping them? Is by really improving their operational efficiency. So all the undifferentiated heavy lifting tasks of deployment, patching, monitoring, sharing the workloads across multiple domain controllers, all of that AWS takes care of in the shared responsibility model, whereas customers' responsibility remains to be administering the users, their access, group memberships, GPOs, and trust relationship between AWS Managed AD and their self-managed AD. AWS Managed AD is available as a single tenant, single for a single domain mode, but highly available across multiple availability zones and multiple regions. By default, when customers subscribe to AWS Managed AD, there are 2 domain controllers that spin up, but it can scale out to any region that customers want to replicate these domain controllers or these data across different regions. So we provide that capability to customers where they have the control to replicate the data or not replicate the data in a region for their worldwide operations based on their compliance requirements. It's secure. It's AWS Managed AD is compliant to various industry standards like SOC 2 Type 2, FedRAMP, Moderate and High, PCI and HIPAA, and there is a whole detailed list of different compliance resources, different services that are compliant to different standards. And how do you configure a compliance for AWS Managed AD? Here is a resource that's available for you to look up in there. So what we are seeing is customers are leveraging AWS Managed AD to migrate and modernize their journey, right, for cloud transformation. And they are using primarily it in 2 modes. One is in a standalone mode where AWS Managed Active Directory is in a standalone mode, and users and groups get created over there, gets managed in AWS Managed AD only. And this is we are seeing customers who do a lot of divestitures, acquisitions, right, and there is just a lot of churn in terms of identities in there. So they want to streamline their infrastructure and identity lifecycle and identity store by using AWS Managed AD. So customers who want to who acquire new companies, they will just rather than consolidating the domain to their existing Active Directory, they are moving their users and group over to AWS Managed AD, and then slowly reducing their dependency on their on-prem or self-managed AD. So that's a very typical use case. We are seeing customers using it for divestitures and acquisitions. The other one is a lot of times we are seeing customers, they want the business users, the business developers, business application developers, they want to develop they want to test and develop their application, and they want to integrate it with Active Directory, right? But they only want it as an ephemeral infrastructure. They only want it for a certain time period, right? They want to build their business application, integrate it with Active Directory, test out their functional, non-functional use cases, scale out, load testing, all of those use cases, and then test it for a month, couple of months, what have you, and then get rid of that infrastructure. So that's another use case. We are finding a lot of customers using it for their non-production environments and using AWS Managed AD in the standalone mode. This is in contrast to the other architecture we are seeing where customers are using AWS Managed AD in a trust relationship to their self-managed AD so that they can quickly integrate their existing users and their credentials to other AWS services, because those AWS services will then in turn integrate with AWS Managed AD, which is now in a trust relationship, resource trust forest mode, integrated into their on-premise Active Directory. So this allows customers to quickly to accelerate the adoption of their AWS cloud native services, while still leveraging their credentials, users credentials, the existing users credentials, and making it easier for their users to authenticate to these cloud native services through AWS Managed Active Directory. So the key features that are available from AWS Managed AD, it's secure, flexible, and configurable. Most importantly, it's scalable across AWS regions in there. So very quickly, customers are able to scale worldwide as they need across these regions. Not only that, it's actually a Microsoft AD 2019 version, which is available to the customer. So it's actual Active Directory that is available, not a variant of it. Of course, like I mentioned, they can deploy it in a resource trust forest mode, or they can actually deploy it in, or they can create users in AWS Managed AD standalone mode. There are configurable settings that are available on AWS Managed Active Directory. So even though we do not provide domain access to the customers, but we understand that customers have to modify these directory settings based on their InfoSec policies, whether it's password policies or what have you, or extend the schema. So we allow those configurations to be made available to the customers from AWS Managed Active Directory, so that customers can just manage their users, groups, and policies. Right? It's available for seamless domain joins for EC2 instances. A lot of use cases where customers want to leverage their existing credentials, users' credentials, to quickly access EC2 compute instances. So AWS Managed AD integrates with EC2 for seamless domain joins. Like I mentioned, it's available across multiple regions, including Greater China region as a support, and it's an AWS managed infrastructure. A few use cases where customers are using AWS Managed AD is like Samsung heavy industry. So they use AWS Managed AD to integrate with RDS instances and EC2 instances to quickly roll out access for their domain users, and they used it for at scale to quickly start adopting Amazon EC2 and RDS instances for their databases. Capital One, worldwide name, they use AWS Managed AD at a global scale to manage cross-account and multi-account access for their enterprise services. Similarly, Davienda uses AWS Managed AD to quickly roll out their desktop virtualization services using Amazon Workspaces and reduce the time to market from months and weeks to days in there. And this is where I'm going to hand it over to Jaswinder from DXC Technologies to talk about more use cases where they have seen customers adopting AWS Managed AD to accelerate their cloud journey.
Thanks, Harvey, for this opportunity that you gave us to present these use cases. So I want to start with some details on how AWS plays a very vital role in our partner ecosystem. We have a very strong, long-standing partnership with AWS, and with that partnership, we have initiated a lot of customers on their cloud journey. This partnership has allowed us to modernize a lot of workloads that our customer had previously on their on-prem environment. We have built an AWS capability within DXC, which helps customer to move their workloads on application, on database, maybe on data intelligence like ML and AI. And we help them in moving all these workloads from their on-prem environment to the cloud, to the AWS environment. We have customers starting from from all the ranges. We have customers. We have enterprise customers. We have small and medium range customers. But the kind of solutions that AWS is providing, it is matching the scale and complexity of all kind of customers that we have here. I would like to discuss two use cases today for this webinar. First one is about a customer, a DXC customer from finance domain in EMEA region. It was this company, this customer is actually an association of a lot of smaller organizations. Each of them came with their own IT environment. Some of them were acquired. Some due to some of them were acquired, and then there were some mergers. And due to all these acquisitions, mergers, and associations, the customer IT environment grew up to be very complex. And each of these companies had their own internal IT policies which they didn't want to give up. So this eventually presented a hurdle to us in moving the customer's IT workload to a lean environment, to an agile environment. The diverse environment that the customer has, and then the internal policies, and on top of that, being in a finance domain, the compliance laws mandated the use of a complex and distributed identity and access management environment. So in order to move that, in order to present a solution which will be reproducible, which we can use multiple times over and over again for multiple sections, multiple parts of this organization, we needed a solution which can scale from small environment to a large environment. So I want to discuss two use cases for today's webinar. The first one is about one of our long-standing customer from finance domain in EMEA region. It is actually an association of a lot of smaller organizations which came together, and then there were some mergers and divestitures, and this led to a very complex IT infrastructure which needed consolidation. At this point of time, the customer was looking not only for this consolidation, they were also looking to be agile. So they realized in order to be competitive still and relevant in today's IT scenario, they need to slim down, they need to trim down their infrastructure, consolidate and reorganize. The problem with this, the problem which was hindering for this journey was that their internal policies and the compliance mandates, since this is a customer in finance domain, they have to follow the compliance mandates, compliance laws. In order to satisfy these requirements, the IAM environment was going to be very complicated. So DXC introduced or implemented a solution using AWS Managed ADDS. This provided the managed ADDS from AWS. It provided a solution that fits the scale and complexity of this environment. It is a design which is reproducible, and we saw this design as kind of a blueprint architecture which we can implement over and over again for the various organizations within this big organization. And this will allow customer to, this will give customer a confidence to start to adopt a cloud only and cloud first approach. So we first implemented it on a smaller section for few of the business critical application that the customer had, and we showed the results. We showed the outcome of this architecture, and it was very well accepted by the users and the business itself. And this first instance of this architecture, it gave the customer confidence to move their other workloads, the other business critical applications, also to the AWS cloud environment. So this not only helped in creating a security boundary for each of the business critical applications, where the compliance mandated that not everyone gets access, but it also provided the impetus to customers' cloud journey, and they were very confident after this first architecture to move to a cloud only approach. The second use case I have is about a multinational company which is headquartered in US, but they have presence all over the globe. So this customer was it had a very wide variety of workloads, starting from Windows, Linux, and all other kind of all other servers. And they were looking to initiate a journey towards cloud, and the move from a capex model to opex model was a driving factor, was the business driver for this journey. The problem they were having for this journey was that there were a number of legacy applications in this environment, which were difficult to be adopted on a cloud platform. These applications were heavily reliant on the customer's existing AD environment, and the transition plan, the transformation plan, must involve a coexistence where some of these legacy applications can still work with the traditional on-prem Active Directory, but some of the other applications which were cloud ready, which adopted modern authentication methods, could be moved to a cloud-based approach. So in this scenario, we implemented AWS Managed Active Directory instance, and we created a two-way trust with customers' on-prem Active Directory. This enabled the customer to leverage leverage AWS first-hand apps and services, while also allowing the legacy application to still continue to use the on-prem Active Directory. And we also set up a single sign-on based on the AWS Managed AD instance, which allowed the users in the customer environment to access the other SaaS services which were earlier accessed using the customer's on-prem Active Directory. So this allowed customer to move some of the more applications with modern authentication method to AWS, and this allowed a breathing space for the customer to plan for the transition of their legacy applications in a planned manner, so that it doesn't cause any business disruption. This allowed the customer to eventually reduce their operational expenses and also the carbon footprint, since they reduced a lot of servers which were there on-prem, and their on-prem the data center footprints also got reduced. So these are the two use cases for today. I'll give it back to Harvey.
Thanks, Jaswinder, for those use cases. So like I mentioned, once customers have their on-premise Active Directory, which contains users and groups, and they are on their cloud adoption journey to AWS and deployed AWS Managed AD and integrated AWS Managed AD in a resource forest trust mode. In this case, whether it's a one-way trust or a two-way trust, then all those users can quickly start to access these other AWS services using their existing credentials. Now, these other AWS services could be their Windows workloads, Windows applications, or just compute instances, whether these are Windows or Linux compute instances, and a variety of Amazon RDS services in there. RDS for Oracle, RDS for SQL Server, and also Amazon FSx, the file share services. So not only Windows workloads, but a variety or 10 plus AWS managed applications, workspaces, like I spoke about the Vienda use case, how they are using AWS Managed AD to allow their end users to access Amazon workspaces, worktalks, and through Identity Center, which is a rebranded AWS SSO service, customers are using it for single sign-on to other services. So once they have deployed AWS Managed AD, they can integrate with Azure AD through Azure AD Connect, which enables them to access Office 365 services. Customers can use AWS Managed AD for ADFS services and integrate and carry over their legacy applications who are still dependent on ADFS to leverage AWS Managed AD, and then slowly deprecate the dependency on Active Directory and ADFS based on their timelines. Apart from it, since it's an Active Directory, which is also available as a general LDAP store for authentication and authorization purposes, so customers can onboard any workload which is an LDAP compliant or a directory aware workload, like Oracle databases through EUS or SAP workloads and .NET applications that rely on Active Directory technology. They can integrate with AWS Managed AD and start and accelerate their journey on deprecating their dependency on their self-managed AD. And once AWS Managed AD is integrated with AWS IAM Identity Center, through that they can integrate all these SAML-based application for single sign-on purposes for these SaaS apps. Now I'm going to hand it over to Rodney, who is going to demonstrate how to quickly set up AWS Managed AD and also show a few integration use cases on how to integrate AWS Managed AD to these AWS services. Over to you, Rodney.
Thank you, Harvey. With AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory, you can quickly integrate your identities with your workloads and services on AWS. Whether you're migrating and setting up trusts with your self-managed AD, or you decide to deploy AWS Managed AD as your primary source of authentication, AWS Managed AD can help you on your modernization journey. Today, I am going to demonstrate a deployment of AWS Managed Microsoft AD and some of the integration steps, along with a few of the supported AWS services and features. So let's dive right into the console and get started. First, we'll head over to the Directory Service. You can deploy Managed AD using the console, the CLI, or with infrastructure as code. We're going to do today's demo within the console. AWS Managed Microsoft AD is already defaulted in the drop-down menu, so we'll go ahead and select Setup Directory. Click on Next. Now we have a few options and fields that need to be completed. For this demo, we'll select Enterprise Edition. The Enterprise Edition is optimized for approximately 500,000 objects, and we have the ability to deploy it in a multi-region configuration. Next, we'll need to provide the DNS name for the directory. I'll be using the DNS name demo.corp.local with a NetBIOS name of demo. With AWS Managed Microsoft AD, you're given a delegated admin account that has full access to a delegated OU, where you can create your users, your groups, computer objects, group policies, and define fine-grained password policies. So let's go ahead and set a password for this default account. Click on Next. Now we need to specify the VPC and the two subnets that will be used by the service. We'll select US West 1B and US West 1C in this case. Click Next, and we simply have to review the options that we selected and click Create Directory. This will deploy the domain controllers and inject the ENIs into the subnets that you selected. This normally takes a little while to complete, So we'll switch over to another region where I've already deployed AWS Managed Microsoft AD. As I mentioned, Enterprise Edition is capable of being multi-region. So let's extend this directory to another region where we may want to run some additional workloads. We'll go ahead and click on Add Region. Select the region that we want to deploy the additional domain controller site to. In this case, US East 2. Then we'll select the VPC, choosing a site or range that doesn't overlap, and 2 subnets that it will be deployed into. So we'll use, again, 2A and 2B. We'll click the Add button, and this will deploy all of the underlying infrastructure and deploy the domain controllers into a new Active Directory site. Now let's take a look at the seamless domain join feature. So with the seamless domain join feature, there's no need to script or automate your Windows and Linux systems to join the AWS Managed Microsoft AD when they're launched. We'll walk through this example using an EC2 instance. So we'll browse over to the service, click on Launch Instance. We'll give it a name of example-windows-EC2. And we'll be using a Windows Server 2022 license included AMI for this. And we can leave it with the t2.micro. That will be fine for our purposes. We can select a key pair. Make sure that we have the appropriate network settings for this EC2 instance and the security groups. Scroll the whole way to the bottom into the advanced details. This is where we're going to be doing the same seamless domain join settings. We'll select our directory from the drop-down menu, demo.corp.local, and an IAM role that includes the Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core and Amazon SSM Directory Service access permissions attached to it. I have one created here for that purpose. We'll launch the instance, and that's all we need to do. At this point, we can launch it. It will automatically join the domain for us. No scripting, no maintenance needed. So at this point, we have our Active Directory domain controllers deployed in a multi-region configuration. We're able to seamlessly join our instances to the directory, as well as manage that directory from our domain joined instances. So what about developer workstation access? Well, we can easily integrate our AWS Managed Microsoft AD with Amazon Workspaces. We'll browse over to the Workspaces service. Amazon Workspaces gives you the ability to deploy virtual, cloud-based Windows and Linux desktops for your users. Let's take a look at what it takes to integrate Amazon Workspaces with our directory. Let's click on Create Workspaces to start the process. As you can see, our directory is listed here. It's the first time that we're using this directory, so we'll need to register it. Let's go ahead and select it, click Register. We'll select the 2 subnets. We'll use, again, 2A and 2B. We can choose to enable self-service permissions. Self-service enables your users to change things like disk volume size, compute type, and so on, but we'll leave that unchecked for now. We can also enable the same Managed Active Directory for use with our WorkDocs service right here in the console, but we'll leave that unchecked in this demo. Let's click on Register. Now we can select our newly registered directory and click on Next. We have the option to assign users from our directory and assign them directly to this particular workspace. Or we have the ability to create new users from this console location. So we'll go ahead and create a user in our directory. We'll call him John Smith. We'll include an email address as well. Click on Next. And we can see here that we can select from users that are already in our directory or the user that we just created, our John Smith user. Let's click on Next. Select the bundle that we want to use. And in this case, we'll go ahead and use the free tier eligible one.
Clicking next again. We can leave the defaults here for the rest of the options, including customizations, reviewing the options that we've already configured. Click Create Workspaces. And that's it. With just a few clicks, we've integrated our Active Directory with Workspaces, created our first virtual desktop for one of our new users. So once this workspace deploys, the user will receive an email, do their first password reset, and be able to start using the environment. Another common use case that we see is Windows integrated authentication for Microsoft SQL databases. AWS Managed Microsoft AD makes it easy to enable this feature with Amazon Relational Database Service, or RDS. Let's browse to the service. And in here, you have the ability to create or modify existing RDS SQL instances so that you can use Active Directory credentials to access those database resources. Let's walk through the integration steps. We'll go ahead and create a new database, selecting Microsoft SQL as the engine option. We're going to leave most of the defaults here, but we'll go ahead and specify an admin password. Continue to scroll down. Take notice of the Microsoft SQL Server Windows Authentication option. Let's go ahead and enable that with a click. We can browse for our directory. Here's our demo.corp.local. We're choosing that. Continue to scroll down, create the database, and that's it. Once this spins up, we'll have a Microsoft SQL database instance that's integrated with our AWS Managed Microsoft AD. We can connect to it using standard SQL tools and begin configuring permissions for the users and groups in that directory. We just looked at a couple of the supported native AWS features and services that directly integrate with AWS Managed Microsoft AD. With just a few clicks, we were able to deploy all of our Active Directory infrastructure in a multi-region configuration, seamlessly join new server instances to the domain, deploy virtual desktops for our users, and deploy an Active Directory integrated Microsoft SQL instance. These are just a few of the ways that AWS Managed Microsoft AD integrates directly with AWS services and your workloads. As we've seen, it's easy to deploy this in your account for testing and production purposes. Thank you for joining me as we learned about AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory. Over to you, Harvey.
Thanks, Roddy, for the use cases. I think this was really helpful and showed how quickly it is, how easy it is to not only enable AWS Managed Active Directory, but also integrate it with different AWS services. For our viewers over here, I'm going to leave them with a few resources that they can use to not only read about this service, but also go ahead and execute some workshops in their own AWS accounts and actually integrate it with their Windows workloads. And please feel free to reach out to your AWS account teams if you want to get any clarification or learn more about this service. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this session. Hopefully this was helpful to you and it can help you accelerate your journey for modernizing and migrating to AWS cloud services. See you.